You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
Go ahead and subscribe, please. This case takes place entirely in North Wales, United Kingdom, and covers a period of several years, with the most intense criminal activity occurring between 2017 and 2023. The perpetrator is Neil Frederick Foden, born in August 1957, meaning he was already in his 60s when the systematic abuse began, and remained in that age group throughout the entire timeline that eventually led to his arrest, trial, and lengthy imprisonment. For more than 3 decades, Neil Foden had been a fixture in Welsh education. He started his career in 1988 as a classroom English teacher and displayed remarkable ambition, rising rapidly through the ranks of school leadership. By 1997, less than 10 years after entering the profession, he had secured the headship of Ysgol Friars in Bangor, at the time one of the largest secondary schools in North Wales, with approximately 1,400 pupils on roll. Over the following 25 years, he cultivated a public profile as a respected, outspoken commentator on educational matters. He was regularly invited onto BBC Wales, local radio stations, and even national outlets to give his views on school funding, teacher workload, curriculum changes, and government policy. Politicians from both the Welsh and Westminster parliaments treated his opinions as authoritative, and journalists frequently sought his quotes. This visibility fed directly into an already grandiose and domineering personality that colleagues would later describe in chilling detail. Inside the school, staff lived in an atmosphere of intimidation. Senior leadership meetings were dominated by Foden. Decisions that should have been collective were simply announced as fate's accomplice. He deliberately designed structures that concentrated almost all meaningful power in his own hands: short-term contracts for senior and middle leaders, selective use of capability procedures, and a culture of public criticism that left people terrified of speaking out. Numerous employees told investigators they genuinely feared that raising even minor concerns could cost them their jobs and their entire careers. Parents, too, felt silenced. Several admitted they worried that any complaint might result in their child being quietly removed from the school roll or otherwise disadvantaged. On one documented occasion, an employment tribunal formally found that Foden had bullied a member of staff who had dared to challenge irregularities in examination results. He received a 2-year final written warning, but the sanction proved meaningless. He retained full access to children and continued to run the school exactly as before. The bullying finding arose because Foden had been falsifying GCSE and A-level data to inflate the school's published performance and secure better funding and league table positions. When another teacher noticed the irregularities and reported them through official channels, Foden responded by subjecting the whistleblower to 4 years of sustained harassment. Yet when the matter was investigated, almost the entire senior team and many middle leaders signed a letter of unequivocal support for Foden. Some later admitted they had done so under extreme duress, terrified of the consequences of refusal. Others appeared to have developed a genuinely cult-like loyalty to a man they saw as a visionary leader. Everything changed in 2018 when the school's long-serving deputy head teacher, who had also been the designated safeguarding lead, died suddenly. Instead of advertising the vacancy or appointing a qualified replacement, Neil Foden simply declared himself responsible for all pastoral care and child protection duties across the entire school. He possessed no formal safeguarding qualifications and no prior experience in the role, yet nobody, neither the governing body, nor the local authority, nor his own senior team, felt able to challenge the decision. Overnight he gained unrestricted access to the most vulnerable pupils in the school, and complete control over the investigation of any complaint made about his own behavior. Shortly afterwards, he attracted national notoriety for an entirely different reason. He issued a directive that any pupil owing as little as 2 pence in lunch money would be refused a hot meal and given only a piece of fruit. The policy caused outrage across the UK and was publicly condemned by footballer Marcus Rashford, who was campaigning against child food poverty. That controversy, however, would later seem almost trivial compared to what was taking place behind the locked door of the head teacher's office. An independent serious case review published after Foden's conviction identified no fewer than 50 separate occasions between 2018 and 2023 when staff, external agencies, or members of the public raised concerns serious enough that, had they been properly investigated, the abuse could have been stopped years earlier. 50 distinct opportunities were missed. As early as 2018, staff noticed Foden sending messages late at night from his personal phone to a female pupil. The same girl was later observed asleep in his office, with her head resting on his desk. Around the same time, another pupil reported seeing him walking alone across school grounds with a different girl who then climbed into his private car. Police were informed, but officers accepted his explanation that he was simply giving her a lift home. Neither child was interviewed, and the file was closed within days. Because Foden now occupied the safeguarding lead role himself, every subsequent concern about his own conduct was routed back to him personally for investigation, an obvious and glaring conflict of interest that remarkably nobody in authority appears to have noticed or challenged. He began holding prolonged one-to-one support sessions with selected vulnerable girls in his office, always with the blinds drawn and the lights switched off to protect confidentiality. In 2019, senior staff observed him accompanying a pupil to police interviews and medical appointments without parental knowledge or consent. They verbally warned him about professional boundaries, but never created any written record. In 2020, external agencies made formal referrals citing clear grooming behaviors. Each was dismissed on the grounds that it did not meet threshold for child protection intervention. During the COVID lockdowns, he kept 2 particular girls in school without authorization so he could continue to see them alone. In 2021, despite all the unresolved allegations, he was promoted to an executive headship overseeing a second school. Complaints followed him there almost immediately. By early 2022, both staff and pupils were openly talking about the fact that he was regularly alone with vulnerable girls behind closed doors. In March 2023, his own senior leadership team finally issued a written instruction that he must keep his office door open and blinds raised whenever a pupil was present. He simply ignored it. In summer 2023, a social worker reported that Foden had hugged a pupil without consent. The file was passed between agencies for 9 weeks without any action being taken. During that entire period, he continued private meetings exactly as before. Only on the 6th of September 2023 did the dam finally break. A girl referred to in court documents as Childa walked into a pastoral office at the start of the school day, visibly shaking, and disclosed that she had been in a sexual relationship with the head teacher for several years. She showed staff members a series of explicit WhatsApp messages and photographs stored on her phone. Within minutes, the police were called. Childa was so terrified that she hid inside a cupboard. Foden quickly realized something was happening and began frantically searching the building for her. In a blind panic, he deleted 17 graphic images she had sent in, not realizing that forensic recovery would later retrieve them anyway. North Wales police arrested him the same day. Other victims rapidly came forward once they realized he was no longer untouchable. Digital devices seized from his home and office contained thousands of messages that mapped years of systematic grooming and abuse. Victims were identified only by letters victim A, B, C, etc., because they were minors at the time and are entitled to lifelong anonymity under UK law. The following details are deeply disturbing. Victim entered the school in 2017 with identified vulnerabilities. A safeguarding plan explicitly required female-only pastoral support. In January 2019, Foden ignored the plan, accompanied her to statutory meetings, gave her his personal contact details, and began prolonged private communication. He took her to GP appointments, sexual assault referral centers, and gynecology clinics, all without parental knowledge. Medical correspondence was addressed to him as if he were her guardian. Staff witnessed hand-holding, her head on his shoulder, and extended periods alone together. He collected her for late-night drives, lying to her mother about cake-baking classes. Messages escalated from emotional manipulation to explicit sexual demands. In the car, he forced oral sex and, exploiting a lifelong urine fetish, made victims drink liters of water before forcing urination for his gratification. He repeatedly instructed deletion of evidence and told her to take it to your grave. Her browser history showed searches like how to know if an older man is grooming you and prison sentences for teachers who abuse pupils. Victim C was groomed in parallel. Late-night personal emails, sleep in his office, seen getting into his car. Police again accepted lift home without interviewing the child. Victim E was called his little sex toy and forced to address him as Mr. P for perfect. He assaulted her repeatedly in his car and in a hotel the night before he delivered a speech on safeguarding at an education conference. Victim B was grabbed by the neck while he forced his hand up her thigh. Victim F received prolonged non-consensual hugs as the first stage of escalation. Victim G was hugged for over 5 minutes and later physically dragged to his office. Victim S and others reported unwanted touching that was never properly followed up. The serious case review mentions victims coded at least up to S, meaning a minimum of 19 children experienced some form of abuse or boundary violation. Foden gave no comment answers throughout police interviews. Forensic examination of devices produced overwhelming evidence. He was charged within 2 days and remanded in custody. The trial began on the 22nd of April 2024 at Mold Crown Court and lasted 16 days. Prosecutors demonstrated identical patterns across multiple victims: gradual grooming via private messaging, escalation to sexual demands, off-site meetings, repeated instructions to delete evidence, and threats of emotional abandonment. Phone data, hotel receipts, school diaries, and victims' contemporaneous notes corroborated everything. The defense attempted to cast doubt on teenage memory and suggested innocent actions had been misconstrued. On the 15th of May 2024, the jury convicted him on all 19 counts submitted, including 12 counts of sexual activity with a child and possession of indecent images. On the 1st of July 2024, he was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment, with a direction to serve at least 2/3 before parole eligibility. The judge described him as a calculated, arrogant predator who had exploited his position with breathtaking entitlement and showed not the slightest remorse. He has been permanently prohibited from ever working with children again. For many familiar with the full serious case review, the sentence, however lengthy, feels secondary to the bigger question. How was one man allowed to abuse at least 19 children over so many years, in plain sight, despite 50 separate opportunities to intervene? Staff were intimidated into silence, governors were complacent, local authority officers were passive, police closed files too quickly, and social services referrals were repeatedly downgraded or lost. The rot was not limited to Neil Foden alone. It exposed catastrophic, collective failure across multiple layers of the child protection system. That is what makes this one of the most infuriating cases in recent British history. A respected, media-friendly head teacher who systematically preyed on the most vulnerable pupils in his care for years because, For far too long, nobody was prepared to be the one who finally stood up and said enough.